Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. You are joined by your two usual hosts here. We've got Tom Mannering.
Hello.
And myself, Josh Hartley. How are we doing this fine 4-day weekend, Tom?
I'm loving it, mate. I'm loving it. We're recording on Sunday. It's been sunny for 4 days now.
I know.
I've been in the garden doing gardening work. I've been out for walks. I've, enjoyed the sun as much as someone with my complexion is willing to enjoy the sun. And yeah, it's been nice just having a few days off work, and I don't really want to go back tomorrow. But other than that, I'm doing really, really well. How are you, Josh?
I'm much the same.
Yeah.
To be honest, and it's just speaking about like enjoying the sun, bearing in mind our complexions as well. Because I've been wearing shorts for a lot of the weekend, and I was hanging out round at my parents', and they've got a nice garden there. So my shins are now pink. So
nice. So the sun's like a weird one for me because I have like. The more sun I get, the better, right?
Yeah.
This is the case for many people. But because I have a skin condition, for people who haven't seen me in person, whilst I am beautiful, I am ravaged by psoriasis.
Yes.
I'm supposed to get out in the sun a bit, and the doctor's like, you need to get out, you need to get as much sunlight as you can, but not too much. And I'm like,
not the bad amount.
Yeah, and I'm like, so can you be a bit more specific on like how much is too much, and just get the right amount. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I kind of I try to go out in the sun, and I'll try and get out for a walk, but then as soon as I kind of start to feel when you're out in the sun, you can kind of feel your skin getting hot. Does that make sense? I'm kind of like, right, that's kind of enough. That's
too late though, isn't it?
Well,
when you reach that point.
No, I think as long as because obviously we don't get direct, we don't get Spain, Tenerife style sun where it's beating down on you. We get kind of that sort of overcast sun, and you've still got cloud cover and things like that. So I have to be kind of careful how much I'm out in it, and it is a bit of a tightrope to kind of walk. It doesn't help that I'm a nerd, so the rest of the time I'm inside, so I don't see the sun. So when I do go out, it's like
I'm sure I've played a game of Warhammer in someone's garden.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, just when it's been a nice day, get a bit of that vitamin D.
I've done that. I've played Warhammer in someone's garden. I've done role plays in someone's garden, which is a really challenging thing because this was years ago as well. So this was back in the days when it was all pen and paper. Mm-hmm. And you would basically have to have paperweights all over the table to hold down character sheets of things, because the slightest gust of wind will send those flying, and the last thing you want to happen to your character sheet is it goes into your neighbour's garden.
I mean, no risk of that with 40k rule books or codices.
Well, that's true, but they tend to be you say what you will about Games Workshop, but the codexes are pretty heavy duty stuff. You could kill a man with them. So, and maybe you have. So they're quite heavy duty at least, but I get what you mean. You're gonna have the pages flicking over and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember that. I think the funniest one I ever saw was years and years and years ago when I was at secondary school. Was we were allowed to go into certain rooms in the school to play card games, because we played Pokemon and Magic the Gathering and things like that. Yeah. And for whatever reason, one day they just decided to clamp down on this, and they were like, right, no more card games in this room. I can't remember if it was
no fun allowed.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a specific teacher just decided they were going to have an embargo on it or whatever. But we got sent out into the playground, where the other kids were, which is bad enough. But we got sent out into the playground, and a couple of guys decided to try and play Magic on the tarmac in a yard.
No.
And that went about as well as you would anticipate playing with small pieces of card in England would go. So yeah, that was quite funny. So don't try and play trading card games outside, folks. That's dumb.
That's silly. That's silly. Did the teacher ever explain like why? Like it seemed pretty innocuous and harmless, really.
Yeah, we used to get like, so we had a Warhammer 40,000 club at my school, kind of very very unofficially. Like it wasn't like kind of a sanctioned club the way like netball club was and stuff like that. It was like basically the gym teacher just kind of got permission to use the gym after school on like a Thursday night or whatever to run like a Warhammer club, and he basically just like get out tables and stuff, and like he brought his own terrain and that. Like, fair dues to the guy, you know, he pretty much did it all himself. And you know, like a lot of the geekier folk, myself included, would go to that, and then the kind of the people from it during the afternoons would like they'd either like work on army lists, or they'd build decks for Magic or whatever. And we usually got away with it, but now and then you just get like a teacher that would just kind of take umbrage with it. It's a bit like the kind of satanic panic kind of thing, where you know they just sort of they'd see like a random article or something, you know, in the newspaper that, you know, D&D causes like murders, or, you know, Warhammer is responsible for gun crime or whatever, you know, or the random panic they want to associate to something. I remember like there was this whole thing about Pokemon cards being equivalent to gambling as well that popped up when they got banned at my school for a period because they were seen as gambling, because kids were like trading them back and forth and stuff. It was mental. But we did have a whole scandal at my school about Pokemon cards getting stolen as well, where basically like there was a spat of kids' Pokemon cards getting stolen out of their bags and that, because they were worth, you know, this was like...
They were worth something.
Fairly early days, but they were still worth a little bit of money. So yeah, it was a weird school, to be fair. They picked some really weird hills to die on. And they never really stuck to it either. It was only ever kind of very sporadic, you know, and then it'd kind of fade into obscurity and you'd go back to just doing the same thing all over again. So...
Yeah, I think that the worst example of that sort of thing was in my school. Oh my god, this is dreadful. The assistant head decided to mandate that there was going to be the girls were going to be banned from wearing thongs, and it's like, I'm sure someone pointed out really quickly to him, how are you enforcing that? How are you... What? How?
How are you even aware of that in the first place? Like, what scenario came up that it came to your awareness that there was, like, more than a handful of girls wearing thongs? Like, that's fucked up, man.
I mean, yeah, there's no ban on boys wearing thongs, incidentally.
That's sexism.
Yeah. So, like, dreadful. Very ill thought.
That's mental, man. We had like a lot of stuff like that as well. So we had a very strongly regimented uniform code, and basically, if I remember rightly, there was no like concession for boys in summer wearing anything but trousers. Like we had to wear trousers. But girls were allowed, as standard, they could wear like skirts or they could wear trousers if they wanted to. And we like really were kind of pushing for, you know, we'd really like to wear shorts, you know, when it gets really, really hot, you know, like some sort of formal short, if such a thing even exists. And they were like, no. So then some guy took it to like the next extreme and was like, well, can I wear a skirt then?
Yeah.
Because that's at least a bit cooler. And that was a whole thing that I remember kind of going down. And I think that the outcome of it was we eventually got it where we were allowed to wear our gym shorts. Like we were basically allowed to wear our gym kit like on really, really hot days.
Okay.
If it got like really bad, you could bring your gym kit with you and change into it. Because I have a vague memory of sitting in a classroom wearing my gym kit when it was really hot. So school's weird, man. I always think like I'm quite pro uniforms to a point. Like I like a bit of uniformity, and to kind of bring it back to like hobby stuff. So when I worked at Games Workshop, I always quite liked their uniform because it was just a t-shirt. It was just kind of a loose fitting t-shirt with a small logo on it. It wasn't anything overbearing. You know, it was just a blue polo shirt or a black polo shirt with a logo on it, and then you had a jumper as well that you could like wear on colder days. And that was it. You know, you could wear your own jeans, your own shoes. You know, you had no real kind of... They didn't dictate what you could really wear. I used to wear the shirt, but it was at a period of my life where for some reason I wore cardigans all the time. You might even remember this, Josh, because I've met you. I used to wear a black cardigan.
Oh, yes.
All the time.
Oh, I remember. Sorry, when you said cardigans, I immediately went to Werther's original advert there. But, like, yeah. No, I remember that,
Yeah,
yes.
so I used to wear this black cardigan over my shirt, and, like, I'd have it so that it was open so you could still see the logo and that. And I remember it was such a bone of contention because, like, some managers didn't mind. But then I went down to, like, Warhammer World, and I'd be wearing it, and they'd be like, take that off. And I'm like, I'm not taking it off. Like, it's too warm to wear a jumper, but cold enough that I kind of want another layer on.
Yeah.
So then they stopped me doing that, so I started wearing a long sleeve t-shirt underneath my t-shirt, and then I was like, got ya. Got you on a technicality.
Tom games the system again.
But yeah, that was. I think that's a really good way to do kind of your uniform, and I think some places just go really too far to the extreme with it as well. It's like
it's perfectly simple. It's some individuals who are in charge just like to bully people over something, and if uniform is the thing they can pick, they'll pick it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was that was a strange time. Anyway, there was a point of conversation that I wanted to bring up that pertains to what I've been doing over the last few days.
Yes.
And this is something we've spoke about before, but I thought I'd give the audience an update, and we can kind of have a chat about it as well. So, as I mentioned, it's Sunday today. Last night was Saturday, which is my usual, what I call my COVID group, because it's a group that started during COVID. And it was my... They're called the Five Treasure Company. It's a first edition Pathfinder game that I've been running for probably about 18 months now, I think, give or take. And it runs weekly. And they were up to about level 13. And I'm using the past tense here because last night was, rather unfortunately, a TPK, which is a total party kill.
Yeah.
Which is the first one I've had for a while, to be fair. And it's an interesting...
No, because you had a TPK with Call of Cthulhu recently, did you not?
Call of Cthulhu TPKs don't count. That's written into the book. Yeah. Okay, I'll rephrase it. It's my first D20 system TPK for a while. So basically, what happened? Long story short, the party they'd come off the back of kind of exploring a mine, and they'd come up to the surface, and there was this storm going on, but it was a wild magic storm, and they were approaching this outpost, and they tried to do a frontal assault on this outpost, hit the gates, while they were being shot at from the towers around the gates by these Batmen.
Wait, what? Hold on.
These creatures, they're called Sabasans, and they're basically like humanoids with bats.
Well, I'm disappointed now.
It's not Batman. There wasn't like a group of Batmans.
An army of Batmen.
So, funnily enough, there's a creature in Batman called Man-Bat, which is basically what these things are, right?
Yeah.
They're basically like a race of Man-Bats. And they breach the gates while being attacked by these creatures, only to breach the gates, and there's some ogrekin, some half-ogres, and more of these Man-Bats inside. So they end up getting basically kind of flanked by the Man-Bats on the towers, the ogrekin inside, and the Man-Bats inside, and they're in the middle of a mana storm, a magic storm, which is causing wild magic effects. Now, what's interesting about this is it was basically 3 previous things that I've had result in the death of a player or parties all happening at once. Wild magic, which killed Barry in one of the crossovers. Yeah. You may remember.
Yes. Flipping everything upside down.
Yep. Encountering 2 encounters at once, which happened in several games before, but the one that I remember the most is the pirate game, a short-lived pirate game that you played in, where you triggered 2 encounters at once, and going in unprepared. Basically, the party were already very down on resources because they'd kind of already done this dungeon, and then they'd kind of gone in. They hadn't really prepped for a frontal assault, and they didn't really have a lot of resources available anyway. And there was another factor as well, which is just bad luck. The guys really rolled quite poorly. And this is a group that, like, there have been deaths in this group, but they have been fairly limited. So they're level 13. I think there's been 3 or 4 deaths in the party, and it's the same characters because they've been brought back. And yeah, it was really bad luck for them that this happened. They just kind of ended up in a situation where they were just constantly on the back foot. The wild magic was causing things to, like, at one point everyone in metal armor got pulled down to the ground because it got magnetized. Then people got flung up into the air. Then black tentacles came out of the earth and started grappling everyone. So they were dealing with so much stuff that they were just constantly trying to regroup. Couldn't really regroup because they were being flanked, so they couldn't, like, fall back and regroup or anything like that. And the things they were fighting, the Man-Bats and the Ogrekin, are not that powerful compared to them. These are like CR6, CR7 creatures that are dealing with, like, a level 13 party that should have been able to probably manage them under better circumstances. But it was just a series of unfortunate things combined with some bad luck, some less than stellar decisions, and it just all kind of unfortunately led to a TPK, which spelled the end of the 5 Treasure Company as a game anyway.
Yeah, so a couple of questions then. I don't know, have you and the players had a conversation as to whether they want to continue and how they want to continue?
So we ran quite late. The combat was basically the whole session because it was a massive brawl. So we did run quite late last night, but we had a little chat when it finished up. But I said I kind of wanted people to sleep on it, because you don't want to make decisions in the heat of the moment, kind of thing. Basically, the guys, we'd been talking about kind of rounding down the campaign anyway, because it was getting kind of that level where it starts to get a bit more unwieldy. And the guys had kind of said, they were okay with that. And we kind of had a chat about it. And basically, what the guys have got, they've got resources available to them because of the level they're at and the reputation they have, where basically Andoran will probably come to rescue them, which is where they're from, and will recover their bodies and potentially could bring them back to life. And I said, look, this is a possibility. This is something that you have the resources to do because of some of the optional rules we're using. Do you want to do that? And a couple of them said yes and no, basically. They were kind of like, we'd like the characters to survive, but we're happy to kind of stop playing them. So potentially we're kind of having a chat about it at the moment. A couple of them are going to kind of talk to me about how they see that going. And then I'm going to do maybe a little epilogue next week where we'll just kind of round out what happens in the aftermath of everything that's kind of transpired and what happens with their characters, living or dead, from that point on. And then we're kind of just going to have a discussion about what we do next, whether we play a different system or someone else GMs and things like that.
Sure.
So I've kind of given them a few days to go away and think about it, because it's always sad when characters die, and we've talked about this before at length. And it's even worse when you get a TPK and a story ends, And it's not the story anybody wants, but it's the story you've got, so you need to make the most of it. And kind of look on the positive sides of it, and that's kind of something I did try and espouse last night. But sometimes that can be hard to take in the heat of the moment. I've had characters die and I have not taken it well. I've had characters die and I've taken it in my stride. It largely depends on any number of factors. So I've kind of given them a bit of time just to go through the process, as it were, and kind of get their heads straight, and then we can have a chat about what we do next.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this: a TPK at level 13 probably stings a bit less than a TPK at a really low level. At least your characters have had stories.
I think in some ways, yes. In some ways, I think it can sting more, though, because you've had the time to get invested.
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
So you've had sort of... It's a weird one, because every player is different, and a lot of GMs are different on this as well. In some cases, players do kind of lose interest in their characters. When they've played them for such a long time, they kind of feel they've done everything they want to do with them. Maybe you've played through that character's sub-story and you're just there to kind of fill in the numbers, or just to see someone else's story or the overarching story through to its completion. and maybe your character's not as well invested in that as they could be. I think sometimes if I've just made a character and they cark it, I'll be a bit frustrated, but I'm like, well, I haven't really invested much. I've maybe invested some time into building them. I've maybe invested a bit of money into getting a miniature, which is my bugbear. Is I like to always get minis, and the character dies on session 1. I'm like, well, that's 10 quid wasted. But
flips table.
Yeah. But otherwise, it's not great either way. But I think if you've had that time to get invested in the character, and you are really invested in the character, you're really excited about playing them, you're really excited about seeing where the story ends up, and you don't imagine that in a shallow grave, then it can be quite bitter. It's a bit of pill to swallow. I think there's kind of a point. It's a bit like playing Pathfinder and D&D. There's a sweet spot where it's at its best. And I think there is a point where you kind of get so invested in your character that you become... And you've not seen enough of the story, and there's that kind of midpoint that it can really, really hurt, to kind of lose that character, and it's understandable. And then I think that can tail off, maybe once you've seen their story through and, they die. But then I have 2 very, very long-lived characters in different games. I don't play. I tend to revisit them on occasion. And I'm not sure how I would react if they died, because they've been around for so long. It would be like losing a friend kind of thing. And I know that sounds a bit melodramatic, but...
No, I totally get that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's someone that I know very well because I made them up, and they've had such a long story, but it is a possibility. You always have to kind of prepare yourself for that reality in your fictional universe. So yeah, it is a weird one. I don't think character death is ever easy, but I think you need to look on the positives. It opens up a new beginning. I think no person, if you envision the adventuring lifestyle as a real thing, if you pretend for a second that that's a reality, you would be very naive to enter that lifestyle and not think there is a reasonably high chance that you're going to die face down in a muddy field somewhere or a dirty dungeon, because that is just the harsh reality. The converse side of it is you end up very rich and famous and successful, but that's the risk you run.
I mean, it does kind of exist in the real world. They're called mercenaries. Like, you can be a gunfighter, but it is a very, like you say, in real life, I imagine it is either a very short-lived career or a very successful one.
Yeah. I suppose criminals as well have quite a similar kind of sort of approach to things. So it is. It was tough, and it was bitter, and some people took it better than others, and that's completely understandable, given the circumstances of it. But I'm quite excited to see. I'm looking forward to kind of writing an epilogue. And I'm hoping all the guys kind of give me something to kind of work on that, because it's funnily enough, when I'd been prepping the session yesterday before we even had the game, I was actually thinking about what the epilogue of the campaign was going to be, because we've been kind of talking about rounding it off anyway.
All right.
So I was kind of like, right, when this adventure finishes, I want to run this adventure, and that can kind of tail into quite a nice epilogue. So I'm looking forward to the guys kind of giving me something to work with, and then I'll sort of weave a little bit of a narrative to kind of tie it off, and that will probably be quite bittersweet, I imagine, because I don't think they're all going to be coming back. I don't think they've all got the resources to do it. But those that do, it'd be interesting to see what they envision their character's life being after that. What is probably their biggest defeat so far. So yeah, that was my Saturday night.
Yeah, nice. Good job murdering the the party.
I do try. I actually hate killing party members, and
the dice roll, and that's something that happens.
There's just this choice you kind of have to make. You can pull punches, and you will try and maybe split the damage out a little bit and pull a couple of punches. Maybe not use things as effectively as they can be if you see things kind of going sideways. But there becomes a point where it will become painfully obvious to your players you're doing that, and then you're not doing them justice. I've seen it firsthand. I've been on the receiving end of that, and it feels lousy as a player because it's like when you play someone a game, like a real game, you play someone a sport game or you play someone on a computer game and they're taking it easy on you.
Yeah.
And you can feel it, and it's like there's one thing for someone to kind of maybe not go at 100%, but there's another thing for someone to kids glove you. And that's not fun either because you're kind of being talked down to and being patronised at that point. So and you don't want your players to pick up on that because that's not fun. Yeah.
Fair enough. I have it's a RPG topic again.
Okay.
But I have some advice that I want to seek off you.
Okay, go for it.
So just based on my friends that I'm running D&D for here, I can't remember if we covered this off in last week's episode. I don't think we did, but basically I'm running through the Stranger Things starter kit. I thought last session was going to be the last session of that.
Yeah.
Turns out combat takes a lot longer, particularly for new players. So we've reached the final dungeon of it, and that's where we've called it there, and we're going to reconvene on the 17th.
Okay.
But what is becoming clear is that everyone seems to be enjoying it, and that they are interested in doing a proper campaign and creating their own characters for it.
Yeah.
Now, we've got two of the players know exactly what they want to build. Corinne wants to be a dwarf bard, and Will wants to be a tiefling rogue.
Okay.
Classic. I don't know what Doug wants to build just yet. I think Doug's the one who's played D&D previously, and I think he might be sitting back and waiting to see what everyone else builds and build something to fill a gap within the party, basically.
Okay.
But I was having a chat with Susan. Susan has pet rats.
Okay.
She absolutely loves the creatures. So we were having a conversation about what race her character could be, and I've floated the idea. It's not an official race in Dungeons and Dragons, but why don't we come up with some rules so that you could play a Ratling or Skaven or something along those lines? And she's up for it. She would she was really keen on the idea of creating a player character that is. We'll go with Ratling so that Games Workshop don't sue us.
So Ratfolk is probably the term you want to use. It's a bit less derogatory. Yeah,
okay, Ratfolk.
So you're in quite a lucky position because a couple of years ago you would have kind of had to figure that out yourself. You've got now. Firstly, there are quite a few races that you could kind of substitute for something like that.
My initial thought was mechanically make them a halfling and switch some things out.
Well,
so
let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
Let me finish. However, there are now actually rules for making custom races, so you don't need to figure that out. So I think it's in. So
I've got
Cauldron of Everything, if memory serves. I'm going off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've got the core rule books. I've got the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual.
Okay. So,
and just a couple of things to note. We still don't know what campaign we're going to run. I'm going to run one of the pre-written ones, but
sure.
I assume that it's going to be set in the Forgotten Realms, though, because I think that's where it's most likely to be set.
Yeah, so I mean, you can still make up races, like just because you're using. So the thing is, and this is something I struggled with for quite a while. Just because you're using an established setting doesn't mean you can't add to it. You know, it's not set in stone. If you want to make Ratfolk, you make Ratfolk.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are Ratfolk that actually exist for Pathfinder, so you could use them as kind of an idea of what a Ratfolk might have. And then transfuse that over to 5th edition using. I would probably pick up if you really want to do it and you want to do it right. I'd pick up Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It's a good book to have anyway because it's got a lot of optional rules in it and some extra races and things. And you can get it like on D&D Beyond and Roll20 for a fairly reasonable price, I think. Not that I'm advertising for D&D; they're not sponsoring this podcast.
However, Wizards, if you're listening. Hit us up.
Get that. And then you've got race building rules in there. I think it's called ancestry building because they're trying to kind of move away from using the term race just because of connotations.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So
okay, that makes sense.
You kind of want to build an ancestry. So you probably want to like give them small. Probably give them like dexterity as an increase.
So this is why I thought halfling would be a good baseline for it, because that's how I imagine this rat folk. Rat folk are probably going to stand between 3 and 4 foot tall. They're going to be naturally quite dexterous. I think the thing that I was going to switch out was halflings also get a bonus to charm, which could also work because I imagine rat folk would be good at deception, like as in they're quite cunning.
So I would you can, again, this is kind of talked through in Tasha's, if I remember rightly, and I'll double check after the episode and let you know, but you can basically pick out like traits and things, so you could be like, you might want to give them like a bonus to stealth and a bonus to like deception, and give them like scent, because they've got little
that was the other thing that I was gonna like, some sort of rule where they get a bonus to survival checks if they're tracking something.
It would be like advantage on survival, on perception if they're using the scent of smell, or survival if they're tracking something that has a scent potentially, things like that. And to be honest, like for a home game where you've not got, so when you're building a custom race, so I had to do this for Pathfinder when we added in Goliaths, because Goliaths don't officially exist in Pathfinder. They exist in 3.5, but and they kind of move over, but they don't quite perfectly mesh. So I had to do a little bit of tweaking just to kind of make them work the way I wanted them to work. And if you're building with the intent of just letting someone do something they want to do because they think it's cool, especially someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with the system, you're probably fairly safe. The only time it becomes a concern to me is if it's someone like trying to min-max or power game and they're trying to optimize a build via specific.
No names will be dropped. Yes,
via custom shit.
I know some players.
That's when I'm like, hang on a minute, like I see what you're doing and I'm not for it. So I think if they want to do it, definitely let them do it. Build a rat folk for them. If they like rabbits, there's actually a rabbit race out there as well.
I remember you saying, because that's in one of the recent supplements, isn't it?
It's in two of them. It's in the module The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and it's also in the newly released, again not sponsored by Wizards, Monsters of the Multiverse as well.
Right.
Which is what I was looking at there to see if there was any rat races currently in existence.
Yeah.
So you've got options, mate.
And it'll be fun though, in my head, I can introduce rat folk to the Forgotten Realms, but in my head, they're going to be quite rare.
Yeah.
Like, they literally don't come to the surface that often.
Yeah.
So, but the nice thing is, depending on what campaign we go for, they're probably going to start in one of the big settlements like Baldur's Gate, and the people of Baldur's Gate have seen everything.
Yeah.
Right? So when Susan's character is interacting with NPCs, they're probably not going to be too fussed by that they're talking to this big talking rat.
No.
It's if they go out to the sticks, I imagine that then it would get a bit interesting with how NPCs interact with her.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I always try and kind of play it for the most part. In your bigger, more metropolis or cosmopolitan areas, people are more adjusted to seeing strange and unusual things, be it because of magic or just because of commerce and trade. But then when you get out to like local rural areas, you get the kind of the hills have eyes and we don't get many of your sort around here kind of thing going on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to putting on some West Country accents.
Yeah, I can imagine
the town.
I could definitely imagine that.
We don't get much strangers round here.
I played. I ran a game and they went to like this kind of xenophobic town, very sort of backwards place.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was just kind of imagining the League of Gentlemen, kind of.
Yes.
Is it Royston Vasey?
Royston Vasey, yeah.
Just kind of that sort of setting where everyone's just a bit weird and a bit kind of not really PC or. And again, you're going to have to gauge that with your players. You don't want to offend anyone. You've got to make sure it's kind of done in the right tone and with the right intent. But yeah, like I love when players play like, it's like in my D&D game, they're playing monstrous races. So they're orcs and they're goblins and they're hobgoblins and they're bugbears and things like that. But they're in a place where everyone is one of those things. So it doesn't really matter. But they are eventually going to end up in places where everyone isn't one of those things. And that's going to be an interesting sort of thing to play off of and give some interesting character moments. But yeah, man, that sounds like really good fun. And if that's something they're excited about, you're doing the right thing by enabling that and yes-anding it rather than being like, no, there's no rat folk in Forgotten Realms.
Yeah. Also means that if I do miniatures for them, I can just dig out some cool Skaven minis.
One of the Skaven assassins or something.
Well, it depends on what class Susan ends up going, because the pre-gen class that she's running at the moment is a paladin,
right?
Which I kind of like the idea of, like a knightly rat. But
that's very Westfall Abbey kind of. Redwall Abbey, not Westwall. Not Westwall, that's Warcraft. Redwall Abbey.
Yeah, and then because I was thinking, oh well, that's great because I could just use a storm vermin. If she goes for one of those, but I don't know. We'll have a proper chat when we've finished the Stranger Things module and see how they're all feeling about it. I mean, to go back on how the session went, they enjoyed it. They did find combat's definitely like the thing that they find the trickiest rules wise to get their head around. I was doing a lot of reminding, basically, like, okay, so you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. Yeah. It comes with practice though, and we were chatting about it, and one of the things I think anyway is, and I get why they made all the pre-gen characters level 3, because it means they're a bit more interesting. It means they can face up against some more difficult enemies, and they've got more things that they can do with those characters. But for people who have never played D&D, it's probably a bit overwhelming, and I dare say they'll be a lot more comfortable starting at level 1 and just having a limited number of things they can do and building up on top of that. Yeah, so
that's a good way to do it, mate.
Yeah, so looking forward to our next session in a couple of weeks' time, and obviously I'll keep you all posted.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to hearing about it, and good luck with your character, Jen.
Yes, cheers. Right, well, on that note, I think that is all that we have time for this week. So, as always, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, take care.
Bye!
Bye! Thank you.